Dear friends online, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Hsin-yuan, the Deputy Artistic Director of NTCH. Welcome you to join us online to have this artistic talk with curators and directors in Taiwan and in other countries. Yesterday we have our first artist talk, but there were some technical issues, so that there were some problems with the audio and also the visual effect. So I have to say sorry. I'm here to apologize to you, but today we have made some adjustments. So I hope everything is fine today. And also yesterday, some audience reminded us that we don't have to be so nervous. We can just relax and have a casual talk. And I would like to thank them for their feedback. So today, our participants said they will all be very relaxed, and some of them even prepared some wine, and they are going to drink and talk with us. So later we'll see who is that person. And also today we have two different channels. One is for English, the other is for Mandarin. So because we have these simultaneous interpretations, so there may be some delay of our conversation. So please tolerate this technical issue. So before everything starts, I would like to spend some time to talk to you about the original purpose of this event. This is the first year of Taiwan Week. And it is because the idea of organizing Taiwan Week is because artists in Taiwan, like creators all over the world, should be seen by the world and seek possibilities to be seen in the international stage. Many of our teams have participated in many large international performing arts festivals. But due to the limitations of size and also even the limitation of time, their performance cannot be exactly the same as they did in Taiwan, and they have to compromise a lot of things. This is quite challenging to these performing groups. And this is why we started to think about how to integrate the theatrical spaces and resources in the Greater Taipei area so that the works can be fully presented in the appropriate venues. And we also hope that we can establish a continuous international platform to present contemporary Taiwanese works with diverse cultural issues and performances genres. We also like to use the international network of NTCH so that we can invite curators from all over the world to come to Taiwan. In addition to watching the programs, we also want to organize some local tours or visits so that these curators can really understand the cultural background and the land context in which these works were produced. These are the reasons why we organized Taiwan Week. However, because of the pandemic in 2020, we were not able to realize this event. And this year, because of the pandemic, we have organized this online event. And because of this adjustment, many of the originally planned programs could not meet with you online. And that is why this time we can only have 3 or 4 participants in one talk. So we are really sorry about this arrangement because we really hope to present you as many works as possible. But also, this reminds us that we should always have the social and public nature of an art venue in our mind. We must be more careful to examine the diversity of thinking in terms of culture, gender, structure, and genre in programming and talent cultivation. NTCH is a theater for all, so we really want to work with you and make the whole environment better for performing arts. We also encourage you to keep reminding us what we should improve in the future. So here I would like to say that all these excellent works you see this time are just really a part of our abundant creations here in Taiwan. We really hope that we can invite you to come to Taiwan after the pandemic so that you can experience this diverse, rich, and passionate island. Finally, on behalf of the NTCH, I would like to thank the Ministry of Culture and all the Taiwan diplomatic offices overseas for their assistance in making it possible for international friends to join us online. So, that is my introduction. It's a little bit serious, but very important. I really want to share all this background with you. So, now we're going to start our artist talk. But before we start, I would like to introduce to you the 5 participants of today's talks. We have 3 directors and 2 international curators, and I would like to introduce them to you first. So now you can see all the participants of today's talk on your screen. The first one is a Taiwanese contemporary theater director who can write and direct and is very good at thinking about scene, narrative, and arrangement through musical core structure. And also, in 2019, he participated in the Fall Festival in France. That was the first time he joined that festival, but he attracted so many curators. Let's welcome Mr. Wang Jiaming. Hi, Jiaming. I see your wine. Great. Jiaming, do you want to say hi to everyone because we cannot hear you? We cannot hear you. Hi, all the friends online and offline. Hi, everyone. Great. And the second director has very rich experience in creating works from the Eastern and Western culture, and he is very good at creating a space for people of different backgrounds to talk to each other. I would like to welcome Artistic Director of Theater Works, Mr. Wang Qingsen. Can you hear us, Mr. Wang Qingsen? Do you want to say something
Yes,
to
I can.
others?
Sorry. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope that it will be an interesting conversation or dialogue.
I hear Qingsen in Mandarin and in English, so maybe we need the technical team to help us. So Qingsen,
Yes.
I heard that you have rent a room at a hotel in order to have stable internet connection, right? Is that true?
Yes, yes.
是的，
Yes,
没
I'm
错。
I'm on the hills. I'm on the hills in Italy, and there's no way there's internet up there. So now I've come down to kind of a highway hotel, and it's good. It's serving the purpose.
Great. Thank you very much for have this great space for us, and later we must take this opportunity to have more exchanges. So the third director I want to introduce to you is a very special director because he established his own theater and went back to his hometown Chiayi. He used local Taiwanese dialect as the basis of his creation, and this is the 80th anniversary of his theater company, and he successfully entered big venue and present us the Panelists. Let's welcome Wang Zhaoqian. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to meet you online. And this is such a special occasion. I heard that you have wine with you, right? Yes. So maybe we can have a drink together. Thank you. So in today's talks, we also have 2 international curators. They are really good friends of Taiwan. The first one is... The first curator is Mr. Serge, Rangoni, the artistic director in Belgium and the president of European Convention Center. Hi, Serge.
Hi, how are you? I'm really happy to be here with you. And yes, in short, we are about to open the venue recently, last weekend exactly. And tomorrow we will have a dance company. We are a theater in Belgium, in Liège exactly, and we are an European production center for theater and dance. So we are not an ensemble theater. We don't have actors in the theater, but we obviously we work with companies and we hire actors and directors, and we produce and co-produce different kind of performances from Belgium and abroad.
Thank you, Serge, for your sharing. And sorry, I hear Mandarin and English at the same time, so maybe the technical team too can help me a little. Thank you. And later we can have more conversation with Serge. And the second curator online with us today comes from the very famous theater led by Thomas Osmeer, and he is also a curator, Mr. Nils Haarmann. Let's welcome Mr. Nils Haarmann.
Hello, and thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much everybody watching us online. I'm super happy to exchange with everybody here. Yeah, I represent Schaubühne Theater, which is contrary to the Théâtre in Liège, which Serge represents, an ensemble theater. So we have an ensemble with actors, and we have coming directors as working as guests invited with our ensemble. And I'm at the link between the two. I'm like the link. As a dramaturg, I work in the productions with the invited directors and our ensemble. And I'm currently rehearsing. I'm not in a highway hotel. I'm at a rehearsal stage, and it's our break. So my apologies if people run here. It's because we have opened already, and we will perform all summer, and we also produce new works. And so, yeah, you're in the middle of the artistic process going on here. So my apologies if it gets if people run here, but it's all theater artists doing theater, which is great. And I look forward to the exchange with you, of course.
Thank you for your sharing. I know your schedule is very busy now because the situation is much better there in Europe, and theaters are reopening. You have 1,000 things to do, but still, we would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I would also like to ask the two curators that after almost years of close up, and finally you can come back to theaters. And last time when we meet, Serge, you mentioned that the exchanges in Europe is limited to European artists and venues. So you think it is a kind of crisis to international interactions. So maybe you can share with us what you have observed in the past 1 year about international exchanges in terms of theater and performing arts.
Yes, thank you, Chopin, for this question, because it's really a huge difficulty today, because even in Europe we have a lot of difficulties to work and to circulate and to travel, probably a little bit less in this last weeks. But for instance, Alexander Zeldin went to Paris, and it was a nightmare because the rule changed when the company was on board on train. And so they had to make a quarantine, what was not needed 2 days before. So we see all instabilities and all difficulties. We had two big productions, co-productions with Seoul, the National Theatre Company of Seoul, and we are postponed it years after years. I think it was, yes, last season, this season, not the next, and it will be only in 22-23. So it's really a big problem, and obviously, like you mentioned, with European Theatre Convention, we told this to the Commission, European Commission, not only to be aware about contacts between European countries, but also to develop, to encourage, to give support, to be able to get more in contact in the next month with other continents. And obviously, with Asia, it's absolutely important to learn one from the other and to be able to develop new works. And this event that you organize, it's really, really something incredible, because you make a lot of effort, and really we appreciate a lot.
Thank you, Serge. We understand that the pandemic has affected or disrupted the exchanges between Asia and Europe, and we're all looking forward to more interaction after the pandemic. And I think we have Asian curators among our audience who would like to know more about the current situation in Europe. Okay, so let's continue with the artist talk. I'm going to get our artists to share with us their works. I believe that some of the curators have watched their work and some have not. So let's invite the artists to share with us. The first one will be the Singaporean director, Ong Ken San, and he's going to share his work starring Wei Haiming, the opera diva, and Taiwanese artist Zhang Zhaotang, as well as Chen Jieren. Please go ahead. Ken San, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Sorry about that. It's a work which is of the documentary theatre genre, and actually it's a piece which is the narrative of a traditional artist, or classical traditional artist, a Beijing opera actress, which of course is very unlikely in Taiwan, because what is the history of Beijing opera in Taiwan? And also, it's a documentary theatre genre, which means that it involves a discussion of the nation, and then of art, and finally of the search for a meaning beyond nation and art. So I think that this is it's a very courageous work by Miss Wei, who in a way bared her life in the interviews, and also her innermost desires of searching for some meaning, which is linked to Buddhistic meaning of a traveling soul, a soul who is not bound by the body. So here you see her moving through the labyrinth of the tunnels, which are a part of Taiwan and China's history, where this island Kinmen, which is closer to the coast of China than to Taiwan itself, is constantly bombed in a way by China. And here the army was taking refuge underneath the soil in these underground tunnels, the Taiwanese army. And in a way, Miss Wei has this history because she trained as an actress in a military troupe. So she entered the military troupe at 10 years old, and it follows her story of how, in a way, she was performing for the nation and then subsequently for art, and now she's trying to perform for herself. Next, please. Here you see her in kind of, I would say it's a contemporary costume, but inspired by traditional dress. And it's a re-performance where she performs anew this traditional opera. And of course, it talks about her process of searching for meaning when you learn something from a master, and then how do you find your individual meaning in it. And this traditional opera is basically about Amazons, female generals who actually fought for the nation. And so there's a constant question of what is nation and what is self and what is art and what is inner desire. You know, art also as a kind of a way which can also imprison the self. And this performance of Mu Guiying is an Amazon's name, a female general's name, takes command, and Miss Wei re-performs it and explains to us also the context of this original performance created by the master of Beijing Opera, Mei Langfang, in 1959, when China and Taiwan had no communications at all. Next, please. And you know, this was a collaboration with several Taiwanese artists who were all living during these times of, I would say, from the 60s into present day. And one of the collaborators is a master photographer, Mr. Zhang Zhaotang. And Mr. Zhang Zhaotang was basically a photo genius, and he then started to travel throughout Taiwan during the emergency, because a lot of this performance takes place during the emergency. And the question of what happens when a people is under emergency law, maybe a little bit like the curfews today during the pandemic. What happens to a people during that time? And this photograph is of him traveling throughout Taiwan, and he took photographs everywhere of people on the street, and here was people on the trains. And so there's a kind of a documentary presence throughout. And as we all know, documentary theater as a genre is a construction. So we review that construction, and we also reveal with transparency some of the agendas, like the construction of talking about the relationship between Beijing Opera as a national tool that was used by the military as well. Next slide, please. Here you see Miss Wei, and she's in full regalia, and she here we were refilming the first theater that she performed in, and in this first theater she it was under construction, and she was re-performing this for the camera. And it shows her whole life. So we go back to different theater spaces that she has performed in from childhood to now. Next slide, please. Yes, and this is the famous cave where the military theater was, and this was where she performed at 10 years old. So it's a kind of you see the whole intertwining, the entanglement between Beijing Opera, the aesthetics in Taiwan, as well as the national military propaganda tool that it was entangled with during those years of the 60s. Next, please. Yes. So again, about the Chinese cultural renaissance during that time, and you see a whole history of how America was involved as well, right? So you see that how Nixon and JFK were arguing during the presidential elections about the role of Taiwan. Next, please. And this is the end, which is a live orchestra composed by another one of our composers, Zhang Xuan, who is Taiwanese, a young composer. And what he did was that he took all these traditional materials or other compositions, and Miss Wei sang her standard melodies, but around it, the music was completely recomposed. And this is performed by an ensemble, a kind of ensemble of 6 musicians. Thank you.
We spent about 3 years preparing for this production. It was scheduled last year, but because of the pandemic, it was postponed to earlier this year. And I think the history of Taiwan is very complex because of the colonial era and the transition of political powers. So Ken Sang worked with 3 leading Taiwanese artists, and propose a very visually vivid way to read this piece of Taiwan history. Thank you, Ken-san. Now I want to introduce Wang Jiaming. Wang Jiaming has two works, and which he's going to share with us. The first one is the Strange Tales, Inside Out, about the strange tales from the Chinese studio. And the second one is the Big Bang Species. Let's go with your first work. Okay. The Chinese classic Strange Tales from a Chinese studio is a collection of 491 short stories about ghosts, demons, foxes, and fairies from the 1940s. This book criticized and satirized the chaos of society. And glove puppetry is a traditional Chinese puppetry. The puppets are around 30 meters. It's influenced by traditional Chinese opera, such as Peking opera. So you can find prototype characters, like the young man, young woman, special male character, and senior man and clown. And in this production, you will find all of these characters played by one puppeteer with various voices and tones. We selected 5 stories, including government officials, and traveler's opinion. This traveler's companion is actually the god of death, who is going to take him to the underworld. And a passenger on a boat, frightened by a ghost, but this boatman laughs and says, "Nowhere in this world is not a battlefield." And you will also find a doctor who inadvertently saves a tiger in a forest. A young girl who touches some moles while doing laundry and gets pregnant, but no one believes her story. Okay, so these are the 5 stories, but let's talk about the system of the theater form. When we use small puppets, many theaters or directors would like to create a clean stage. Because they fear that the large objects would steal the thunder of the small puppets. But I'm betting on a different binary in this production. I use chaos and cleanliness as a contrast. So the chaos of the environment versus the simplicity or cleanness of the puppet's movements. I use very realistic, chaotic, traditional laundry that is very common in Taiwan. And the main object of the glove puppetry is the clothes, because the stereotype of ghosts is also clothes, because they have no head or feet. And you will find many these unrealistic elements there, like magic realism. And I use the laundry rope as the ladder to climb up to the realm of gods, the black plastic as a wide river at night, and the cardboard box or ironing board becomes the ground for the puppets. And the puppeteers are also the owner or employees of the laundry, of a laundromat. So this actor and actress plays different roles and interact with these puppeteers. She is the delivery girl, employee of a funeral home, a neighbor, and a murderer. And the background of the stories is vaguely implied as Taiwan 10 years later. It has been raining for half a year, and there's no longer any communication technology such as internet. Time and space seem to be frozen. And the flow of time in the play, in the puppetry, and in the theater are interwoven and generates synchronicity. So for example, one of the videos showing on TV states live news, but for the actors on that scene, it was recorded 10 years ago. They finish a bowl of noodles in real time. And because many people in Taiwan have this habit of eating their meals while watching the news. Music and language used in this production are also worth mentioning because we use at least 3 different Chinese languages here. Chinese languages are rhyming and they create melody. The traditional glove puppetry, live percussion, and string band are also present on the stage, plus the music composed for this play and live performance of the female vocalist. So the production is almost like a musical of the Chinese tradition, a kind of a psychedelic puppet musical.
Thank you, Jiaming, for your sharing. You shared with us a story about ghosts. Now we are going back to talk about a story about human. Oh, actually, it's a story about animals. Well, yes, but animals will also become human beings. So maybe you can share with us another production of you. It is something related to the origin of species created by Darwin. So please share with us Big Bang Species. Yes, I'm inspired by On the Origin of Species, published by Darwin. And of course, this topic is very relevant to the contemporary world that we're living in, or we can say in the context of the so-called Anthropocene. And during the process, two ecological scholars were consulted, and they provided many of the latest understandings and concepts about the histories of genetics development. And they also share with us a lot of different arguments and different concepts of about On the Origin of Species. And there is a book called The Mushroom at the End of the World. And it is a book written by a female ecologist, and it's a quite important book because it discusses capitalism and also different related issues in the context of mushroom as a species. So the premiere was in May 2019, and another version was collectively created in 2020 at the National Theatre, with actors aging from 10 to 60-something. The structure of the performance is based on the 15 chapters of On the Origin of Species, and we divided it into 7 main sections, discussing Darwin's perspective and how he is misunderstood. So in the play, we discuss like natural selection or evolution progress, or the interdependence of species about biodiversity and Darwinian socialism, the common ancestral tree of life, and even some neurology extended from On the Origin of Species. So from the contemporary perspective, this book is an interdisciplinary work, and it is difficult to classify it. But Darwin himself was inspired by geography, and I majored in geography in university too. So in addition to the theories derived from the book, the family histories of the actors are also presented in the production. Many of their ancestors migrated for survival under the threat of war, the lack of food, and the climate. So On the Origin of Species was published in 1859, and we also see a lot of family histories of living actors interweaves with this book. And we are asking questions like, where did I come from? Why am I here? Why are you here? Where did we come from? Why are we here now? And how do you see me? Why do you see me like that? And also on the stage, we see 3 large containers. So it's unclear that had they just arrived, or are they ready to leave, or both. Another topic in this production is like names. From the easily mispronounced title of this play, the Big Bang may be misread as the theme park in Chinese character. Also, in the production, we talk about the names of countries, ethnic groups, places, the names of actors, also the name of the book that Darwin hesitates to decide, or the name of the chicken species, even Madonna's name. Naming is an act of identification, and it's very interesting from a linguistic perspective. Yes? I think the internet connection is not good on your side. Is that better now? So, well, maybe I can just stop here. I'll check my internet connection. Yeah, I cannot hear it in real time. So maybe, Jiaming, you want to log out and then log in again? So while we wait for Jiaming, maybe we can have Zhao Qian to talk about his work with us. Hi. Hi, everyone. My production is The Palaces, and maybe I can start from myself, the story of myself. Can you hear me? Okay. I was born in 1984, the year that coincides with George Orwell's famous novel. So I grew up in a time when Taiwan was the factory of the world. In Europe and in the US, almost every toy you have was made in Taiwan. This was the 80s and 90s when Taiwan was becoming a developing country and making money was a piece of cake. At that time, Taiwan was full of vitality, and everything happened so fast. We have an vulgar, fast food-like culture. But very quickly after that, China rose and Taiwan's energy was sucked out of the country as so many talents and money flew into China. It felt like Taiwan had died. Nearly 2 decades of low wages, wealth disparity, and low economic growth have followed. My generation is sometimes referred as the most miserable generation. This is how I have come along with the society. I can say that the life of Taiwan society has affected me, and its death also affects me. So this work, The Palaces, there are 2 important sources. One is the Decalogue by Polish director Kieslowski, and the other is the 5 Unsolved Mysteries in Taiwan. So Decalogue reviews religious precepts from a very contemporary perspective and shows us the confusion and struggle of modern people. I'm inspired because in the East, since ancient times, we believe that after death, people would go into trial in hell. And the hell is like a palace with numerous layers. You'll be punished according to your sin. And I'm curious to know, how does hell look like to us in contemporary times? Also, there are 5 unsolved mysteries in Taiwan. They are popular folk tales and has been passed down from more than 100 years ago. I think the reason why people love to read them is that because these stories can show us that bad people will be punished in the end. But 100 years later, now, do we still believe that? The Palaces has a very important subtitle that is In Spite of Heaven's Opposition. So in this work, evil and suffering do not favor anyone. Just because you are in the oppressed class doesn't necessarily mean you are good. Neither does your innocence guarantee you a good ending. In the end of the play, I arranged a storytelling session connecting all the stories together and provide an answer to all. In Taiwan, many audience hated it, and they thought it fell into a cause and effect sermon. But there were also many audience loved it and felt it like all mystery was revealed. The effect is very polarizing, and I really like the result. In fact, to me, this production is like a big farewell ceremony at a funeral. The theater company I lead is based in the south part of Taiwan. The place is called Jiayi. It is not so urban, and the people's lifestyle here is still quite traditional. And in southern Taiwan, the traditional funerals are very lively, and some of them even have jiggling stunts, which are even very funny. When the deceased passed away, the local priest will say something like, he was a very nice person, he was very kind when he is alive. No one knows if these are true or not, and not too many people will really care. So I also believe that some people can be comforted by this. And whether it's true or not, people just like to hear something like, and that is what I present all the stories in Palaces. My answer to karma is I don't know, because I think that's the best way to face something we really don't know. In my opinion, the place where Taiwan's folk energy is most abundant is the temple fairs. And it is the most natural and primitive museum. And it is also like an art museum and a theater in the temple fairs. The audience here is not looking from the top down or from the bottom up. So it is like an exhibition right next to you. You can see whatever you want to see. So I think this is the earliest form of immersive theater. In Asia, Taiwan has too many symbols and miracles, including the peaceful end of our authoritarian era, our same-sex marriage, and the possibility of a better gender equality. They actually stemmed from the unique grassroots resilient power of the people here. So I'm curious that does the theater has to be as sophisticated as a boutique, or is it possible for it to go back to a more primitive form or status? Can a folk mystery become a contemporary theater, or can we even abandon the theater? So I think these are the questions that Panelists as a protection wants to ask the world and also people in Taiwan. This is about my production. Thank you. Hsin-yuan. Thank you, Zhao Qian, for your sharing. And I thought all the technical issues have been solved, but sorry for that. So Jiaming, I do want to continue with your introduction. Jiaming, can you hear me? Yes. I think I can just continue. Yes, please. Yes, I can hear you clearly. So you can hear me, right? So I think I can just continue. Let me see. Please, this one? No, it's fine. I can just continue. So in this production, another important topic is the interweaving of diverse timescales. The timescale of family migration history, also the millions of years hidden in the immovable strata, and the personal time with intense emotion of the rapper. And also, in the beginning of the show, I will roast a chicken, and after 1 hour performance, the actors can really eat that chicken. Also, the costumes also represents different time eras. Also, in 1859, in addition to the publish of the book, there are 2 music masterpieces completed. Wagner's Tristan and Isolde and Brahms' Piano Concerto No. 1. These 2 pieces are also presented throughout the play because they represent the same time period with On the Origin of Species. Speaking of music, we also have a cappella of Rachmaninoff's Vesper and a very important live performance of a digital rock band with bass, guitar, and drums. The band is named Elephant Gymnastics. They also participate in the family history section of the performance. So more than 4 different languages are also used in the production. Darwin was quite fond of discussing his view of species evolution through the example of language classification. And these different topics, including language, music, time, 1859, modernity, and the actors at present, Darwin and the fossils, they are like different instruments of a musical score, and they come together and create this big band species. Thank you.
Thank you, Jiaming. I think that these 3 productions are different, yet they're common in that they're they have a certain epic perspective in looking at the human emotions or development in society in a certain time period. So now I'm going to invite our international curators to pose their questions. But before that, please share with us your views about Taiwanese production, especially theater. So maybe Serge can go first. Serge, please.
Yes, I was really impressed by the scale of the productions. Yes, at least for the three main production, a little bit obviously less than Inside Out, but the scale, it's so huge, and also the way of using all the elements. I was really interesting. I saw also some other production that you shown, and I was really impressed in totally the use of light, the use of elements as scenography, and the chorality of the way of playing. It was really interesting.
Thank you, Serge. So, Nils, how about you? What's your observation about Taiwanese theater productions? You are a curator and a dramaturg. I would like to hear from you, please.
Yes, well, first of all, it's like Serge, I was super happy to discover the invited productions and to see them, because my festival, I mean, this is different for other festivals, but the festival we do at Schaubühne here is called Festival of International New Drama. So we essentially search for new text. And this is not always easy, not in all of the parts of the world where we are traveling or we might go on tours. We find theater which deals with new forms of writing. And when I say writing, I mean this really in a broad sense. It can be a written, well-made play, but it can also be more documentary forms, as we deal with, for example, in 1,000 stages. So it's really in a broad sense, but writing as a process of creating, not taking up a classical text and then just interpreting it. So I was really amazed to see the very formally very different approaches of all the different shows, but of writing, of integrating new text, or even though, for example, Jamin's play about Darwin takes up on the evolution of species, but then makes something totally new about it. So also this I would totally consider new writing. And this is something which is very exciting for me to see how formally very different performances all deal with new writing.
Thank you, Nils. We get to see our own uniqueness through other people's eyes, and that's the value of international exchanges. Now, we're going to do Q&A. So we're going to take questions from the curators and from our online audience and online curators. So some of you have maybe watched these works. And if you have questions, please leave your questions in the chat room. At the end of today's talk, we're going to answer your questions. Now I'm going to invite the international curators who are here with us online. So there are several works, so I'm going to group them. So, first, we're going to ask questions about 1,000 Stages and the Inside Out, okay? And for these two productions, they use the vocabulary of contemporary theater to create a new dialogue with traditional art. So, Serge, what are your questions for 1,000 Stages and Inside Out?
First of all, I would like to tell to Onken Sen that I appreciate a lot the play, the southern stages, the structure of the play, because the mix of intimate events, the public life of this diva, the great performer, and the complex and troubled history of the country. It was really, really something that touched me a lot. And I was thinking, what was the working process you use to achieve this balance between and this to find this fluidity of narrative, because also in the opera she changed a style, kind of style during a life of a diva. So this is my first question. My second question is, how do you choose the extract from the different show performed? By way, I mean, was the choice made before the performance or during the construction of a piece? And for Inside Out, for Wang Qiaming, I would like to know the differences in style between the two puppet companies. For me, it was a little bit difficult to understand. Obviously, I understand that you give us a lot of information, not a lot of explanation when you spoke about your show. But for me, it was difficult for me to see how it was, what were the differences, and how you use it in a contemporary and contemporary theatrical context. So I would like a little bit know a little bit more.
Okay, thank you, Serge, for your questions. These are very interesting questions. Ken Sam, please go first.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Serge, for your questions. I think that the first statement I have is that it's a piece which is really about the self. It's very much related to Miss Wei's perspective of life. And that was for me primary, that how did we work to almost like go through a diary of her life, and a diary which began with all the parts that she played first, because of course an actor always begins from that. And so, one of the strong reflections is that it's really an actor's ritual. And one book which was important for me was Stanislavski's An Actor Prepares. So, and actually this book, it's almost like an actor prepares, but for life, not for another part, not for another character. So the desire of the self, for something beyond a people's search became the end result. And this happened really through a kind of a diary. So we went through all the different roles that she played. We explored each central role one day, on the floor. And we then also went back with the assistance and the great artistry of one of our video artists, Chen Tieran. And Chen went with Miss Wei and myself to all the theaters that she had performed in. So we began as a search of who was she behind all the different characters? What was her life beyond all the theaters that she had played in? And one of the lines that she said was that I've played 1,000 stages, I've played 1,000 characters, but I've never really lived life. So this was for me a kind of a discovery from just going through a diary and using the rehearsal process to be a diary. I think that's the central thing that's facing all of us is how do we reframe our work? This pandemic has really woken us up to the fact that we have to possibly rethink of how to work again. And of course, our work in 1,000 stages is transcultural. And how do we actually work through one person? It's basically a monologue. But essentially also, how do we not just think of the country, the art form, but the individual, which is so seldom talked about in Asia. And the last scene is actually really the kind of the pinnacle of collaboration, where she was involved in with Wilson in Orlando. So Miss Wei actually performed as Orlando in Bob's Global Design, and Miss Wei comes out of the process and she says that, but who am I, and what's my soul? You know, after all these parts, after working with Bob and working all the way to a final East-West collaboration, what is the self in all this art? And we ended the work with that. And you see like the whole crisis of crisis in inverted commas of an actor or an artist who prepares, but in the end, your preparation can't be for your art, but it's for your life in a way. So that's the whole process of the rehearsal process being a kind of a diary where we lived her different parts, her different theaters that she performed in. And with the second question about like which parts we chose, some of them were her big classical roles, and by that I also mean like the contemporary theatre that she forged, because she created a lot of new roles, which we would say today is modern contemporary opera, where she sang with a kind of a reinvention of the classical style of singing, but in kind of like maybe the turn of the century, like a time around. Like there's a very famous play where she's almost like a doll's house. It's a discovery of this woman herself, and this role is actually at the turn of the 20th century, and you get to see all these parts that she's performed because we quote them. But after doing this visual and kind of rehearsal diary of all the roles, it became obvious which were the plays or which were the songs or which were the roles that she had to quote. You know, roles of discovering the feminist perspective, roles of discovering how she's, which was like this classical Mu Guiying, which was written in 1959, when China had no relationship to Taiwan at all. And she never knew this play existed because it was created during the Cultural Revolution, I mean, before the Cultural Revolution, but by Mao and the Communist Party to celebrate it. So some of these productions or these quotations were very obvious. They were just important moments in the life of her life, as well as the life of the art form, as well as the life of the country. But in the end, I would say like we still had to really select, because there were at least like 15, 20 central roles, and we selected down to 6, 7. And in fact, I think that if we did a second draft of it, we'll probably take out one more song perhaps, and become even more focused, because I think that the relationship with an international audience is actually through I would say the discovery in the 20th century of the self, and of course how this self in the 21st century becomes also a little bit confused, because we go through this pandemic and we realize that there are many, many questions beyond the self.
May I ask a little
Well,
more thing?
Yes.
Yes, because it was as you explained now. I wonder also all the images of dream or nightmare are images that you build with R, because obviously if it's its own perspective, how do you work with R on this? These beautiful images on the beach, for instance.
Yeah, I think that the way that we collaborated, because there were four of us creating the whole visual landscape and the emotional landscape, and of course the body as a landscape, and her emotions as a landscape. It's a kind of collaboration, and the way I tend to work in a collaboration is to run on parallel tracks. We are all traveling on different tracks, and finally, because we are so much inside this plasma, the tracks start to make sense together. We don't think about illustrating each other's tracks, but like the filmmaker had a track, the photography had a track, she had a track as a performer, as the body, as the emotions, the emotional vessel. I had a track of what I wanted to say as well, and there's just a lot of letting go of becoming borderless, but trying to find our own tracks together. And because we are borderless, we start to speak in having some kind of affinities towards each other, but still very different. So it's about being together but being different.
thank you, Hsin, for your sharing. Now let's welcome Jiaming to answer the question brought up by Serge. Well, to me, these two puppet theater troupes, they are actually inherited from the same master. So they are actually performing in the same system, and they always support with each other when they have performances. So they are very familiar with each other, but they use different languages. One of them use Hakka language, the other use Taiwanese dialect, and one of them like to perform contemporary theater or contemporary scripts. The other stick to traditional scripts. And one likes to use modern elements in the performance. The other likes to use traditional elements. So actually, we started by contacting the contemporary one, but later we realized that if we adopt the traditional one, we have more elements to use. For example, we can ask the god of death to use Hakka language, and common people use Taiwanese dialect. And also, if they speak in traditional script, then it has better connection with the background music, because the rhyme and rhythm are more corresponding to each other. And also for different stories, we may use different script or style. For example, for the first story, is to steal the magic peach, then it's a more traditional script. But for the female story, it will be more contemporary. So also in the rehearsal, we know very clearly that who should play what role. So there's no conflict at all. And sometimes, of course, during the rehearsal, we may get rid of or abandon some traditional elements, but I think it's inevitable. But I think they work quite well. Thank you. Thank you, Jiaming, for your response. And due to the interest time, maybe we can move on with Nils. I believe, Nils, you have more questions to these two productions. Nils, please.
Yes, thanks a lot. So I'm also, because in the conversation many things came up already that maybe I had questions too. I will try to, avoid that we get redundant. But on Ken-sen, my first question would be: I was super amazed by your work, 1,000 stages, yet I've never quite lived. And you've spoken, or you have addressed this moment already, of Wai Hai-min playing Orlando. And for me, this was a very key, like a key to understand the work better. And maybe you can develop on this a little, why you chose this performance that she did. Because in a way, what Virginia Woolf does when she writes Orlando is a bit, I had the feeling, what you were doing with that actress on stage writing this performance, because it is at the one time it is a documentary biography of a person, but it's also theater. It's all theater and it's all fiction, just as well as Virginia Woolf's Orlando is all made of fiction, but it's a real portrait of a real self of her lover Vita Sackville-West. So this was super interesting for me because it opened up to your performance. So that would be my one question. And then the other question is not the question I had prepared, but you were talking about the self being so important in Asia. And that would be interesting just to hear in 2 or 3 more lines what you mean by this. I have a feeling, but it would be interesting to hear in your words, because in a way, yeah, you could say that Orlando as a biography gathers the self of an individual in the Victorian times. Today in Europe, the self would maybe also have more negative meanings politically, egoism, etc., in capitalism. But maybe you can say 2 or 3 more words about the self and its political meaning to do a whole theater performance about the self of somebody. That would be my 2 questions for you. And Charmin, yes, I thought about the phantoms or the ghosts in European theater. And this quote from Heiner Müller came to my mind, where he said that theater is always a dialogue with the dead. And I think I know what Müller means for the European context about our classical Greek theater and Shakespearean theater and staging the works of great dead men and heroes and constantly reviving their drama on stage to have a connection to the present days, but constantly talking through dead people. But I would be really interested to hear more, and you said a little bit already, about the ghosts in your play. In the play once somebody says, yeah, we hope for better weather and world peace. But yeah, maybe to know a little more about the context of ghost in Asian theater, in Taiwanese theater, and how you revive this. And the second question is more about the staging process, because I see you're exploring a collaborative process. You're not only doing a new form of theater, because you put together amazingly these 2 realities of the laundry room, the dry clean, and this puppet theater world. But you give a real reality to both, and in this doing, you collaborate with other artists. And I wanted to know how this process, how you invented this process. Is it a collaborative, shared process where everybody is leading at some point, or did you finally put it all together as a director? That would be my second question.
Thank you, Nils, for your question. Well, you are definitely the professional dramaturg. You provide us with different references in the Western culture and also echoes our context in the Taiwanese context. So maybe we can have Jiaming to answer the questions first. Jiaming, can you hear us? Jiaming? Can you hear me? I just said that maybe we can have Jiaming to answer the questions first. Jiaming? I think maybe some connection issue. So, sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes, I can answer now. So, Jiaming, please. Please wait for a second. I think my computer has some problem. Okay. So you can hear us now, right? Yes. In terms of what Nils just mentioned, the function of ghosts. Well, I don't think about their functions. I think because the original script or the original book is about using ghosts to criticize the real society. But in my production, I want to talk about ghosts from the perspective of time. I want to talk about what is present. Because the present in the theater is not the so-called the future, the now, or the past. I think in theater, it's like everything is on a flat surface, and ghost is not ghost does not about the past. It's always there. For example, when I was young, I always keep the lights on when I'm sleeping because it's like ghost is always there. If the lights off, then ghost would appear. So ghosts are not limited by time. They are always there. And our language can like sermon them. And when they hear us talking about them, they would appear. And all the audience in the venue share the same power to summon the ghost. And death itself is an inner experience. It's not an external event. Death is always there with us. We are always approaching death, and we don't know when will we really meet death. And ghosts actually reflects this kind of anxiety. So I don't think ghosts are a symbol or an icon. They are like a river that is always there, and the river runs through different time scales. The river runs through the puppetry theater, runs through the laundry room. So on the stage, you can see different time and also the presence of ghosts. I think my answer is quite abstract, but that's what I want to say. Thank you. We cannot hear Hsin-yuan. I think there's some problem with the connection. We cannot hear Hsin-yuan now, and Jiamin just finished his answer. So yes, so King Shen, please. King Shen?
Okay. Can you hear me? Because I
Well, do you hear us?
hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. 大家听得到? We cannot hear you now. Consent, please. But we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, this is the interpreter.
Hello,
We can
can you
hear
hear me?
you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, Caroline. Okay, I think that it's important to acknowledge Orlando as actually a hermaphrodite. It's both a male and a female in one body. So this is, I think, the difference that I don't think that Virginia Woolf was talking in terms of metaphors. She was talking about how Orlando has both the female and the male body together. And I think that this is the strongest feeling that I have when I work with actors. I remember that when I first worked with a German novel, the German actor said to me, "I'm not a performer, I'm an actor." And for me, it was a very a profound statement, which is that we're not just performers. We act. We enter into another reality, and there is a double reality. There is the character, and there's the actor existing at both times. This double reality, and hence this hermaphrodite. This two bodies in one, or two selves in one, and I think that the piece deals a lot with this. What is the mastery or the failure of an actor as a human being, or the mastery as a character, right? That these two selves are running in parallel in one body. So so it was an important moment to take Virginia Woolf's narrative, not only because it was a big story for Miss Wei, but also that it has this meaning of the actor and the character lives in one presence. And I think that the second question about the self, I feel like the whole piece is about this ambivalence. The ambivalence of the nation, which is both negative and positive, the ambivalence of art, which is also negative and positive, because I think that what we touched on in the performance or in the production was quite taboo, revealing the entanglement of this classical opera with how would I say, military propaganda. And the self also is also very ambivalent, as you have rightly pointed out, Nils. That it's both egotistical, but also this search, this restless search for the meaning of life. So the whole show is on this ambivalence of the nation, the art, and the self, and we walk through together with her, and we journey with her and with her ambivalence, and in the end, I think it's a wonderful moment when she leaves the stage and she says that, well, I I basically I almost died, and now I want to find a new self. So it's a very simple ending, maybe too simple for such an epic structure that we made up, but it was a simple ending of the self, kind of saying like, after all this grand structure, I really just want to be a self.
Thank you, Ken-san. So the pursuit of a self is a lifetime struggle. So now I'm going to invite Zhao Qian, and let's talk about the other two productions. These two productions are Zhao Qian's Palaces and Jia Ming's Big Bang Species. These two productions discuss penalty and sins, and I believe there's a lot works on these topics in the Western world. So I'm going to invite Nils to ask his questions first.
Thank you very much. So, and I'm going to start with Charmin this time with Big Band Speeches. And my question maybe already again gives a dramaturg context, so don't be afraid. So I wanted to ask you, because it's really interesting that you pick up on Charles Darwin. In a way, for me, he's super ambivalent, because as a German, maybe I always have this horrible heritage which we have of the Nazi ideology, taking his whole theory and putting it on social theory, and making social Darwinism and the survival of the fittest species within the human race, in inverted commas. So for me, this is the super negative side to it. And on the other hand, I think in the Western context of evolution and all the great things that he found out being disputed, not only in the US, also here, partly by religious fundamentalists. And I wanted to know about your thoughts, why you picked up Darwin and his theory. You have answered it a little already in your introduction, but this was very interesting for me, how you picked it up, and maybe your own ambivalence with him and his theory. Also, just throwing this into the conversation, I know that he was, for example, one who fought for the abolition of slavery, which is really interesting in the biography. So taking his theory for nature and putting it on social structures is totally wrong, I think. But history tells us that the danger was there. His works were interpreted like this, and people would refer to him for the most horrible things in history. And then the other question, of course, it's not only big, there's a big band on stage. So about the role of the music and how it gives a structure to the show, and how you worked with this great band we see on stage. That would be my two questions for you, Charmin. And now to Palaces, to this very epic work. You've also answered partly in your introduction already. You said that it refers to the hells in the Eastern context, the palaces, which I didn't know, but I, after some research, found out with the lovely colleagues from the festival, and the judgments. So it's actually about the judgments and the punishments that people face after death. So we deal here with murder and crime in your epic show, which is a joyful subject to deal with. And we stretch over 30 years of time. And I wanted to know a little, you said in your introduction, you don't really know about the role of karma. But I wondered what the religious or spiritual references were, or how you decided to work on something very worldly, let's say, crime and murder, but with a spiritual and religious dimension, which I think in European theater is very unlikely. I couldn't, I didn't have a reference at hand, which would be similar. And the second question is actually spontaneous. I had a second question prepared for you, but I listening to you and listening to you going back to a small region where you came from and starting anew making theater there, I wondered in how far this is reflected in this production. And I really don't know if, for example, the performers are part of your theater company over there, or if this is all a Taipei cast, or that would be the question, in how far you're going back, because I think it's super interesting. It's something that we talk about a lot here, the countryside and village and big city metropolitan areas, ruptures which we observe, and the boundaries between those two in society, often in German society. And theater is more seen as part of the metropolitan culture, and Schaubühne too, I think. But I think it's super interesting to share also about the role of the countryside and going back and making theater there. So I wanted to know if this applies for palaces as well. Those are my questions for you.
Thank you, Nils. Zhao Qian, please go ahead. You go first. Okay. Actually, I have been quite interested in the subject of life and death or penalty. In the past years, the rise of internet and technology have accelerated the confrontation between generations, races, or classes. I work with a group of creators in their 30s, try to look at this changing world from a relatively young perspective. So I think the Palace is a work that was born naturally. And I also want to touch upon this local religious belief and folklore in the southern part of Taiwan, because it's more like a village here, and our belief in heaven and earth and human beings, our worldly view, perhaps that is embedded in our thinking. And so that also touches upon Chiayi. Chiayi is not a city. Chiayi is my hometown. It is not a big city. But I use our mother tongue to stage this place. The Taiwanese language and the local speak this language much more than Mandarin, the official language. And we also, if you talk about penalty, punishment, it's more obvious here in a small place like Chiayi. For instance, the underground, the gangsters, they came from Chiayi. So I think palaces reveal this world to us. I'm finished. Thank you. Thank you, Zhao Qian. I think you can enjoy your wine now. We can spend a lot of time on these questions because your work is an epic in terms of scale, and it's not easy to explain every detail about these Taiwanese contexts. Well, Jiaming, please go to Big Bang Species. I actually love the book on the origin of species. I don't have so much hatred there, but some friends didn't like it, and they didn't like the idea that I was doing a production on this topic. Well, the origin of species for me is like a chemistry, because it triggers a lot of phenomena and a lot of different lines of thinking. It's about the relationship between human beings and the other species and the natural world. And it is also about the struggle inside the human world. So I think there is a sensibility, rationality, and desire, and everything interwoven there. I think it's some kind of tragic situation of human beings. Well, this book, of course, in terms of scientific discovery, is kind of old because we have latest discoveries, sometimes contradictory to what Darwin said. But in terms of a novel, I see a beautiful, interesting imagination there, especially in our times when the pandemic sweeps the entire world. This book provides many interesting points for us to think. Not many people have read the entire book of On the Origin of Species, but I believe this is a starting point to extend many lines of thoughts. And sometimes when the author tries to avoid religious conflict, that is also very interesting because it could extend to other lines. And these species, well, they have their different voices and distinct feelings about time and space. The origin of the different species, they're like musical scores for me. And music is everywhere in this production, and visual materials are always musical for me. And
And also the language presents different rhythms. For example, when they are reading the context from the book, the language is very intense, but when they have casual conversations, the lines are quite loose. So they create different kind of music on the stage, and they also represent different time scale, and that is how I present them on the stage. Thank you. Thank you, Jiaming, for your answer. Now we would like to invite Serge to propose these questions to the Big Band Species and Palaces.
Thanks a lot. I think that there were some similar questions that Nils already, the question about music, the role of the music, Cheng-Ming now already explained a little bit. The only maybe little question that I can add for Cheng-Ming is how have you involved on a dramaturgical point of view the experiences, the own experiences of the performers in the play? What was how have you worked on this? This was one of my question, more on of the way of writing the play itself with the actors. And for Zhao Qian, I wanted to know a little bit about all you other performances, because this is obviously it's a so huge, gigantic piece that I said, okay, what has he done before? Which kind of topic you are interested in? And this is more my question, to know a little bit about your work in general.
Thank you, Serge. Maybe Zhao Qian, please. Okay, thank you for your question. As a creator, I'm always curious about the possibility of art being a public instrument or to intervene with the society and to make some changes. I think artists should look direct to the society and sometimes even challenge the society. So I have done a lot of works in the past few years. For example, last year I had a collaboration project with Hong Kong artists to talk about the disappearance of the mother tongue, titled "The State and Denki." And also, a few years ago, we visited some oyster fishermen to talk about the history of Jiayi. It's like a field survey, and because we interview so many farmers or oyster growers, and we ask a question that maybe it's possible Jiayi never existed. And in addition to being directors, I also curate a festival in Jiayi every spring. And in this festival, we have like different participants. Some of them are artists, some of them are local people. And the curator experience also influenced my worldview. And maybe that can answer the question. Then thank you. And Jiaming, please. The actors on the stage and also the musicians, they are all part of the production. And for the actors, I will ask them to share with us their family history. And for example, some of them have ancestors work in the tea industry, and we would ask them more questions about like tea industry, how did it develop, and the actors will go back to their family and ask their elderlies about their own history. and they have more exploration about themselves and maybe the social context of their ancestors. And during the rehearsals, two actors realized that their mothers actually came from the same small village in Taiwan. So that's we also invite the actors to write their own rap lyrics, and I also write some lyrics, and we also make some extracts from the book of Darwin, and all these were put together as the script, and also we have make use of different scientific languages of the later generation. That is the part of the actors. Also for the band, they have written some new music for the production, and we also asked them to play the music written by Brahms, and also asked them to write scores for the raps written by the actors. And also the band members would talk about their family history on the stage. So everything is interwoven together from the actor, from the book, from the musicians, and together they create a very special texture of my production. Thank you. Thank you for your sharing. We have also some curators online wants to ask some questions. So the first question is to our curators. The first question is to Nils. So during the pandemic of COVID-19, I believe your curatorial work must be influenced. So can you give us some examples that how the context of your program has been changed because of the pandemic, or have you found new ways of expression or performance in face of the pandemic? This is a question to Nils. And regarding
Yes.
the new forms of performance or expression, if you already have it, what kind of feedback do you have? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, like many theaters, we started immediately when the lockdown came with online program, and we streamed old productions. Our theater has a relatively long tradition of 50 years of theater, and it was very well archived. So we have the luxury of great filmed performances of the past 50 or even 60 years. So we showed this, which I think is more an archival or museum quality, and has nothing to do for me with live performance or with theater as we know it. But it was a great opportunity to discover the theater history while theaters were closed, and we did every day a new performance from the archive. And in parallel, we've started working with writers who wrote little texts for our ensemble, with also some nice results. But all this for me also showed how important actually the live is. So we didn't stream live shows from the Schaubühne, which had other reasons, because we are a private theater and staff was on furlough. We had to cancel and postpone the festival, and are planning to do it now in autumn as it was. So we really look forward also to go back to the people making an experience together in front of people making a performance, and this together being theater. I think the pandemic has shown how important that is, and so I wouldn't say our practices or my practice fundamentally changed. Of course, there's interesting forms of interaction live as we do it now here on this panel, on this virtual panel. And these are possible, I think, also in the arts, in fiction, in theater. But I wouldn't say that for the festival, our practice has fundamentally changed. We really hope to do the live edition with all the invited artists from parts of the world which are easy now, or also parts of the world which are difficult now to travel, and plan like this.
Thank you, Nils, for your answer. And Zhao Qian, you mentioned that there's one question you didn't answer, right? Yeah, actually, Nils asked a question about karma, and I would like to add something. In my presentation, I said that I don't know the real principle of karma. It sounds irresponsible. So maybe I can give you another example. That there's a famous film by director Hou Xiaoxian, and at the end of that film, the film was very popular in Europe. And at the end of that film, the glove puppetry master, a very old man, just sit there, look at the sky, and I think it represents some Eastern view of life, because in the Western culture, you believe that human can achieve everything. But in Eastern culture, we believe that there is a kind of supernatural power over there that we can never transcend that power, or we should be submission to that nature, or it's something more powerful than human, but it's not superstitious. I just want to share this with you. And I hope that really answers the question of Nils. And so for the three artists here, do you have any question to the curators online? Because they have asked you very in-depth questions. So maybe do you have questions to the curators? Yes, Zhao Qian. My question is to Serge. So what's your view about the social publicity of the theater, or the public nature of theaters? How does theater serve the public? That is the question to Serge.
You mean now during this period of normally?
Normally.
I think that's yes. We are in a city, and I will speak. I will speak.
You can talk more about. Yes, my question is about normally, but also during the pandemic.
Okay.
好的。
Okay. No, but normally I think that a theater now in a city, it becomes, at least here in Europe, a very crucial place where we can meet people, and we try, especially here in Liège, because we are in the center of a city. We try before the pandemic to have a lot of activities, not only the place at night, but also the possibility to have conferences, to have possibility to meet people and to have exchanges about a lot of topics, social, about the sustainable development, and a lot of topics that we can handle also during the day. My feeling is that theater as also as a place, as a venue, has to change in the city, has to be an open space more and more. And also for we have a great, here in Liège, you have 183 different nationalities. So you have obviously to work with all these differences and try to be the most open and the most open possible, and the place when you can work with young people, schools, and the different topic. This is for me really the social role. I see everywhere that, for instance, all the meetings after the performances, all the exchanges with actors, directors, writers, the people love these more and more. So probably in a city, you have more necessity to speak with other, and not only through the social media, because with the social media you speak only with the same people of you, or you get angry with people who are not thinking like you, and so you disconnect. But to have a possibility to share topics and to discuss, really there is a need of this, and I think that theater has to be connected on this. And the difficulty for us, and for all theater, it's obviously to reach people who are not the same that the people who are already coming in the venue, and this is very difficult. And it has also, it needs also to change the programmation, to change the way of communication. And obviously we are every year thinking of these, trying to find new ways, and it's a big challenge. And during the pandemic, the challenge was to keep in touch with the city, all the people who normally come in the theater, and maybe try to be connected with other people, with younger people, because obviously being only having only the possibility to work with social media, this give you a huge possibility to get in contact with younger people. These are the two things.
Thank you, Serge. We're going to end here with this important topic about the public function of theater. And I want to thank the online audience for your participation. We have overrun for about 20 minutes, so I have to end this. But thank you very much for joining us. And I want to thank the curators and artists. And we will continue with this Taiwan Week event with open mind to increase international exchanges. We hope that our friends in the artist world will get to learn more about Taiwanese production, Taiwanese artists through Taiwan Week. Thank you, Serge, Nils, Zhao Qian, Jiaming, and Ken Shan. Please stay connected. And if you have any feedback about Taiwan Week, please let us know. We will make it better next time. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.